Welcome back to TAD Talks, where every week I sit down with my dad and sustainability expert Tad Radzinski to ask him questions about sustainability topics. Last week we talked about sustainability goals, what they are, what they mean, and how companies set them. If you haven't seen that yet, you can watch that on Tad's YouTube channel. Today we are going to talk about how companies communicate sustainability goals and the importance of their supply chain in setting and achieving sustainability goals. So, we'll get started. How do companies communicate sustainability goals?
Well, they do it multiple ways. Last week we talked about how they kind of set their goals. They do these things called materiality assessments to understand what's important to them as a company and also what's important to their stakeholders, their customers or their employees, that kind of thing. And once they've gone through that process, usually what they're going to do is they're going to establish the goals like we spoke about last week, or they're going to try to set numeric and science-based goals. That's the best thing you can do. If you just pick a number out of the air and say we're going to reduce greenhouse gases by 20%, or we're going to reduce energy by 20%, that's not a good thing to do, because you got to know that you can actually have some opportunity to achieve that. So they get all that done, and then they get the goals established, they're all worked out, and then they will come out publicly with that. Usually most companies are going to make some kind of public statement, because think about it, sustainability is so important to so many people. It's also really important in the world of like financial analysts. Like a lot of you see things like BlackRock, where they're demanding that companies basically focus on climate change, or they're not going to invest in them. And there's just so many people that want to understand this. So what companies typically are going to do is they'll usually communicate on their website by putting their goals out. And most goals are going to be set for 3 to 5 years, like we talked about last week. And what they're going to do is, as they're working towards those goals, they'll usually publish some type of sustainability report. And there's different ways you can do that. There's a organization that sets standards called the Global Reporting Initiative, GRI, and they basically give you guidance on the different attributes you should be considering that when you're reporting your sustainability information. And it gives you that kind of information in terms of what are the certain key aspects you want to focus on. And back in the day, people used to just try to do everything in GRI. They would try to address all of it. It got to these really big, unwieldy reports, and it was crazy. So what they ended up doing then is, by doing materiality, you narrow the field of the things that are important to you as a company. So when you're doing your reporting, then it allows you to just communicate the goals that are most relevant to you based on your materiality assessment. And what we're seeing is, we've helped companies develop sustainability reports, and in the early days, they were big documents, we're writing lots of text and all kinds of crazy stuff. And now I'm seeing a trend more where sustainability reporting is getting more streamlined. The reports are usually all electronic, they're very visual, lots of tables and graphs and data and pictures and just images kind of representing what's going on, and then enough information to be transparent. And then what you can do is, if you're following GRI, you can actually get your sustainability report third-party verified and, basically certified that it follows GRI and meets those standards. So that's what you see. And oftentimes, if you have 3 to 5 year goals, companies may not publish every year. They might publish progress and things like that. So a good place to look is start at someone's, a company's website, and usually they'll have links to that information on there if you really want to learn more and get to really dig into it. And if you remember from our earlier TAD Talks, we've talked about making sure that you're covering, the triple bottom line: economic, environmental, and social in those kind of commitments and communications.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're just bombarded with content these days, so a nice, simple, interactive sustainability report that's very visual and shows you right up front the numbers and the data, and just being really transparent is super helpful when you're actually reading those, because when you open a document and it's 60 pages of straight text, it's definitely very overwhelming, and I don't think it tells a very good story to people who want to see what you're doing in regard to sustainability. And I also really love when they do talk about the social things that they're doing, because we all want to buy from companies who are doing good things to better the world as well. So that's important to think about. And I know that we talked before about suppliers. How are suppliers involved in a company's sustainability program?
Well, most companies are going to rely on a supply chain. You know, if you think about it, like there's a lot of things in the news right now with Pfizer rolling out the first COVID vaccines. So a pharmaceutical company like that, to make that vaccine, they're going to rely on a huge supply chain. You know, just think about all the things we're hearing that it has to be, you know, in these cryogenic freezers, they got to have these manufacturing plants, and anytime you manufacture like a drug like that, there's going to be so many suppliers providing, you know, like all the tubing that goes into the manufacturing plant, the packaging, you know, the vials that it goes into. You see all those vials on the news now. All of those things are provided by suppliers. You know, the pharmaceutical company doesn't make all that, so they're going to reach out to their suppliers. And then if you think about the life cycle of that product, that material, you know, anything, the supply chain has a huge role, because they're providing you, let's just say, the vials. All those vials are going to come in, and the way they're shipped, you know, they might be shrink wrapped and triple packaged, you know, to keep them sterile or whatever. Or they, you know, if they're not sterile, then they got to get sterilized. So the supply chain is really big in the fact that they majorly impact the company's sustainability goals, right? Because just think, if you got a supplier that's sending you a ton of packaging with everything they send you, then that affects your waste diversion goals, your zero waste goals, because then you got to manage all that material. Or let's say that, you know, you actually make the product, but you know, there's so many different things that you're sourcing that your actual manufacturing is only going to be a tiny sliver of the impact. And then all those parts and materials and everything else that comes from the suppliers is going to, you know, make your impact bigger. But, you know, as the company's only measuring their actual energy usage and water and emissions and, you know, their social footprint and all that, the supply chain is downstream or upstream from them. And, you know, they're the ones that are having their own footprints of making all these parts, materials, ingredients, and packaging that comes to the company. I know that there's a pharma company that we do work with, and they did an analysis, and they found that 80% of their carbon footprint as a company is related to their suppliers. So what they have done is they have an initiative now where not only are they doing work on their own goals and reporting that, but they have some major supply chains, sustainable supply chain goals that they've set, where they're actually pushing down to their suppliers, they're working with them, they're trying to educate them about sustainability, and asking them questions about what are you doing as a company. It's kind of like Walmart back in 2010 when they sent out the questionnaire to all their suppliers. You know, that really drove movement in the market. But now, like, you know, anybody that makes anything has a footprint, even though it's not technically their scope 1 or scope 2, that would be their scope 3 emissions are coming from the raw materials and the supply chain and packaging and all that. So that's why it's important that if a company truly wants to look at their overall sustainability, they have to include the suppliers. They got to get them involved, and they got to try to educate and, you know, at least track that in some way. And it's complicated. We're talking to a couple companies now. We're going to help, you know, like some food producers, coffee companies track their scope 3 emissions from actually getting the coffee from, you know, where it's all produced to their plant. You know, so that's big, because they source from, you know, many of these companies source from thousands of other companies.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
you know, it's crazy.
Yeah.
But important, as you can see.
Yeah, that is crazy, and it's crazy to think about, and something that I never would think about in my day-to-day life, so it's important to highlight that. So we mentioned in our last TAD Talk that a lot of companies set 2020 sustainability goals.
Yes.
And did not meet them for various reasons. If a company doesn't meet their sustainability goals, how can they best communicate that?
Well, I think it's best to be transparent, open, and honest,
Yep.
right? Because you know, most times companies are going to set stretch goals, like, you know, big, hairy, audacious goals. Like, if some of these goals to be carbon neutral or net zero by 2030, 2050, challenging, right? And very hard to do. So I think when you're doing those aspirational type goals, it's kind of expected that you may not achieve them. But I do think, like, if there are situations where you set 2020 goals and you didn't hit them, I think it's just good to be open and honest and say, hey, we set a target, we went to achieve it, and we realized as we really got into it that it was going to be difficult to do. And what we have done now is we reestablished our goals, we recalibrated, and now we know a lot more, because sustainability is a very integrative process. You're always looking for continuous improvement. That's the main thing. So if they made some achievement, like let's say they had a 20% energy reduction goal and they only got 12%, that's still pretty amazing. So they could say, hey, we thought we could do 20, we got 12, we're gonna basically strive forward, and we're gonna keep trying to do better. And now we really had done a really good baseline and benchmark, and we understand where we need to go. So what they're showing is it is a process that involves continuous improvement, and you just got to keep striving forward. And I think if that's a good way to do it. And it's not like in the investment world where if the analysts are predicting that a company is going to hit a certain profit or sales goal and they don't, then their stock kind of crashes. Right now it's not like that yet with sustainability, but it's important that the company just knows that they gotta keep working, and they gotta be just very clear about how they learned, and they're moving forward, and just gonna basically strive to do better on a continuous basis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as a consumer, when a company kind of just comes out and says, hey, we missed the mark, we realize we did not set science-based targets, and we just kind of threw a number out there, and this is what we did achieve, and we didn't meet our goal, but this is where we're going to move forward, and this is our action plan. That is totally fine. I would never be mad at a company for just being super transparent and super educational about what happened, why they didn't meet their goals, and what they're going to do about it moving forward. I think that's a really good precedent to set as a company.
Yeah, and it's important to know too that this whole sustainability thing, even though it's very popular right now, is still evolving and developing, because back in the day, like I said, everybody would just try to do everything at GRI. Mm-hmm. Now there's a whole thing about materiality where you zoom in on what's really important and critical. And the other thing is this whole thing with science-based targets is just pretty new also. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh yeah, we set these goals 5 years ago, and now all these new things have come along on how you do stuff. Mm-hmm. So it's a kind of an evolving field, and even this whole supplier sustainability, huge opportunity. I mean, it's like we haven't even scratched the surface of what can be done with the suppliers, and it's every company has a role in that, and if you do it right, I think it's going to really provide value to not only the company but everybody that supplies them something, because they're going to learn, they're going to get better, and it's going to make a better place for all. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. And the topic for this video was submitted by one of our viewers, so thank you so much, and keep letting us know what you want to hear about. It allows us to go further in depth on topics and really make sure we're telling you guys what you're interested in. So yeah, please put suggestions for future TAD Talks in the comments, and thank you for listening.